Thank you very much for your great introduction. I appreciate that. Hello, everyone. I want to dedicate this talk to the caregivers of people who are losing their memory and just remind them that the people are still great people and you can still love them. And if you need extra help, go ahead and get it, because it is a tough job taking care of someone whose memory is diminishing, but there's a lot of hope. And what I've done is delve into the scientific literature and found peer-reviewed studies that have shown ways that are safe to help people keep their memory, to keep their brains intact. And people ask me, when's the best time to start with this? The best time to start might be, say, the first trimester of pregnancy. In other words, you can't start too early. So even if you're young, go ahead and eat better, get more exercise, stay slim and healthy, and this will all help you keep your brain intact. Today, I'm going to talk some about the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial. I have it abbreviated here as ADEPT. It was a trial that I designed and we ran, and it was designed to see, can we stop dementia from progressing? But that's not really what we found. What we found was by using a multitude of different things, we actually managed to reverse dementia. Now, it was very beginning dementia, and these things won't work as well with more moderate or advanced cases of dementia. However, still good to give a try because they're all healthy and they're all safe. I'll show you the larger team involved in this. Was quite a production to get a clinical trial going. On the last screen, I have my book, Nutrients for Memory, that lets you know how you can do everything that we did in the trial. There's no secrets, there's no charge. The book is under $10 on my website. On this screen, you can see that we wrote a paper on it. I was lead author of the paper, of course, and the paper outlines in more technical terms how we ran our trial. And that is in the journal Brain Sciences, published in 2019. So I ran the trial, I'm the lead author, so I hope that I can enlighten you on what we did and even a little bit more from a recent research. My website's drsteveblake.com. Please feel free to visit it if you need more information than I can give you in this talk. I got a wonderful introduction, and you know about my many publications. I guess I won't go over them right now. I am giving a talk on April 10th for Real Truth About Health on Diabetes Breakthrough, the Key to Insulin Resistance. So that's the top left book on your screen. And you might want to tune in there if you have questions about diabetes and some new information so that we can actually reverse this problem instead of just managing it with drugs and letting it continue and get worse and worse. Dementia can be broken up into many types. And I work at the Maui Memory Clinic with our director, Dr. Thomas Harding, who's an excellent neuropsychologist. And the people that we see there seem to all have mixed dementia. By mixed, I mean it's not just Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's plaques and tau tangles, but it's also a lot about vascular dementia, which has to do with how the blood vessels supply the brain with needed oxygen, glucose, and all the nutrients that our brain needs. These blood vessels, as you know, are often clogged in Americans, leading to heart attacks and strokes. And multiple tiny strokes add up to vascular dementia. The two blue and the yellow wedge in this chart of dementias all involve vascular dementia. The big pink one is Alzheimer's disease, but my information is that also vascular dementia contributes to vascular disease, and I'll be telling you a lot more about how that happens. The differences between normal aging and dementia. In normal aging, yes, we can start being a little bit forgetful. We can keep a list of things to do or a list of things to buy, and they're helpful. But when you start getting into dementia, the lists don't help. You either forget the list at home or forget to look at it at the store. The real key to dementia itself, the definition is that you need help in managing your own care and your activities of daily living. And it would be great if people didn't need that help, because it is a real burden on caregivers whether they be family or professional caregivers. It'd be really great to not have that happen. So in our study, as you can see on the graph on the left, the conversion rate from mild cognitive impairment. Now, if you haven't heard of mild cognitive impairment, abbreviated MCI, this is between normal aging and dementia. And it really spans a pretty broad area because people just entering MCI are almost normal. And people at the end of MCI and entering dementia, they're really not remembering things very well at all. So this mild cognitive impairment is an area that it seems that over time, people with mild cognitive impairment, about 11% of them do progress on to get dementia. So what we did in our trial is we aimed for mild cognitive impairment, which in this testing system would be between 20 and 25. You can see the word mild cognitive impairment on the graph there. By the time we got everyone signed up and the study started, it actually slipped to 19 as an average for the memory and thinking score. So just below mild cognitive impairment and the very beginning of dementia. But look what happened after 3 months. Went up into the normal range, stayed in the normal range until 9 months later, it was 29 out of 30, which is fine. So it may be possible, and it was possible for these people to do this, and it may be possible for you. I'm not making any promises, but I am going to give you what we did, and here it is. No secrets here at all. We did a cup of berries daily. How many of you can handle a cup of berries daily? We used blueberries, strawberries, or red grapes, a cup a day. The red grapes are cheaper and easier to eat. The blueberries are perhaps the very best for your brain because of the anthocyanins. We use walnuts and sunflower seeds, an ounce of each ground up every day. And this is the supply for walnuts, the gamma tocopherol form of vitamin E, and for sunflower seeds, the alpha tocopherol form of vitamin E. We also changed cooking methods, and I'll be telling you a little more about what we did changing cooking methods to reduce advanced glycation end products that are really quite damaging to the brain. And the hardest thing that we did was less saturated fat. And I am going to give it to you today, the facts about saturated fat and dementia. And I hope that you will keep it to the safe levels on saturated fat, because too much really can damage your brain. We also used quite a few supplements, very carefully chosen. As was mentioned, I am author of McGraw-Hill's college textbook, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified. So I chose not only the correct amounts, but the correct forms, used 4 antioxidant minerals that are needed by our own antioxidant enzymes to protect our brains. We used a mixed form of vitamin E, vitamin C, coenzyme Q10 in the ubiquinol form, folate, real folate, not folic acid, and vitamin B12 in the methylcobalamin form. We also use SAMe, which is normally made in the body. It has a wonderful effect in slowing or stopping the production of amyloid plaques in the brain. Not a bad idea. Now, unusually for America, we use 2 medical plants, ginkgo biloba and gotu kola. And these are both safe and effective, and many, many scientific studies have shown that. And I'll show you a few today. Can diet really have an effect on our brain? Well, this study was done, and they used what's called a MIND diet. And the MIND diet is a combination of the Mediterranean diet and the antihypertensive diet to lower blood pressure. When they use this diet, which basically means more berries, green vegetables, and less animal fat, what happened was they had a slower rate of cognitive decline, equivalent to 7.5 years younger. Is that amazing? Food did that. Now here's another study where they used green vegetables. I'm happy to say that the green vegetable garden shown in the screen on the upper left is our own vegetable garden. And our friends see it and they say, what are you doing? You're going to sell them? No, we can eat almost any amount of green vegetables. And they're just about the most perfect food for people, protective and delicious. In the Rush Memory and Aging Project, they compared people who ate just 1 to 2 servings of green vegetables a day with people who ate very little green vegetables a day. That was the equivalent of being 11 years younger in age. So if normally dementia will strike in the 80s, if you can put it off to the 90s, then that's really helpful. In fact, that's the end of the epidemic. If you could slow Alzheimer's 11 years, that would be the end of it, because most people are going to be dead by the time they get dementia. It won't bother them a bit. What about drugs? Do drugs help with dementia? Now, 2 drugs are commonly used in clinics all over America and in the world, donepezil and memantine. However, they do not slow neurodegeneration, which I'll define as the killing off of brain cells and the inability of neurons to communicate with each other. They don't protect the brain with antioxidant function or anti-inflammatory function. Now, I'm quoting a 2018 study here from the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, and they looked very carefully at a large group of people taking these drugs. And they found that donepezil has minimal effects on cognition at a cost of 76% more vomiting and 62% more diarrhea. The one thing that many people with dementia do remember is they don't like donepezil. Memantine has small positive effects, according to this study, and severe possible side effects, including blood clots, psychosis, and heart failure. This is pretty serious stuff for something that really doesn't seem to help very much. Now, we have a new drug that's just been approved, although 3 of the expert panel members resigned in protest at it being approved because it's not very effective and it doesn't seem to be particularly safe either. Possible brain swelling and bleeding are 2 of the problems. Brain hemorrhage is one of the possible side effects with aducanumab. And so, unfortunately, this doesn't seem like perhaps the best way to do it. So let's look at what does work. Well, what about supplements? Can they slow dementia? This study looked at some elders who were supplemented with, they had 300 elders in the study, all 60 to 75. They supplemented them with 200 milligrams of vitamin E in the wrong form, 300 milligrams of vitamin C, not nearly enough, and beta carotene, but not the other carotenoids. However, they improved their memory on tests by about 15%. That's 3 points on the mini mental status exam. That's fantastic. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about a success story. Now, I understand that this is one person and everyone isn't going to have the same results. Now, this lady, Cora, she gave us permission, written permission, to talk about herself and what happened. And this is my wife, Catherine, and I'm in the background, and Cora's daughter, Ginger, is there behind her. Ginger really helped with her mom. When we first saw her, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and at 2 p.m. asked what she had for lunch. She couldn't answer at all. Breakfast, no answer. Anything, no answer. She really was just not there. Well, we worked with her every month for 2 years. And she also came in a wheelchair because her knees were very swollen. She had bad headaches and her health was not so good. Now, I would say that her diet had more room for improvement than normal because she was eating principally, how do I say this delicately, junk food. She's eating fast food, okay? And the fast food was not nourishing her and it was giving her excess saturated fats. She was also lacking many of the nutrients that we need. So we, with her help from Ginger, her daughter, had her change her diet. And over the months, it was amazing. She started brightening up. The lights started coming on inside. She got out of her wheelchair and moved to a walker. Over time, her headaches eased and her knees became uninflamed by this change in diet to the point where she would use a cane. And then near the end of the 2 years, she was forgetting her cane and just walking. Isn't that wonderful? But what's really wonderful is that her brain brightened up. At the end of 2 years, she wrote a paper came upstage in front of 50 doctors at our St. Francis Liliha clinic and gave a talk about how she had Alzheimer's disease and no longer has it. Shocked the doctors for sure, because this is thought to be impossible. And it is just a case study, so you can't depend on it. Now, our trial was a clinical randomized trial, and that is more dependable than a certain case. But I do want to say that it is possible to get better. And we grew to really love Cora highly and really are amazed at the great progress that she did. Now, part of her problem, of course, was vascular dementia, not just Alzheimer's disease. And she also took the brain and body food with which she couldn't get into the trial. She was 1 year too young to get into our trial. So we gave her the supplement that we made for people who couldn't get into the trial. And I think that those nutrients helped, and easing vascular dementia helped quite a bit. What would you call this? It's called saturated fats. On the top of the screen, we have two pictures. Okay, on the right, we have saturated fats, and on the left, we have saturated fats. The effects of saturated fats are, when they're excessive in the diet, to clog arteries, as shown here. Saturated fats shown on the left. What do they do when you have high dietary saturated fat? Well, they increase arterial blockage. They reduce the blood supply to brain cells and kill off brain cells. Also, by clogging arteries, pieces of that yellow plaque you see can break off. If they're tiny pieces, they can create vascular dementia by having multiple tiny strokes. One stroke might kill off a memory center. One stroke might kill off thinking area, little by little eating up the brain. Or, of course, a bigger piece of plaque can break off and clog the brain, causing a severe or deadly stroke or heart attack. So it's really better not to have these clogged arteries. Now, I think it's interesting that increased cholesterol as a result of these saturated fats being high in the diet increases the formation of amyloid plaques in the brain. And I'll tell you a little bit about lipid rafts as we go along here today. Reduce saturated fats, which are usually animal fats in the diet. The only exception to this would be coconut oil. Now, coconut oil doesn't actually exist because in lipid terminology, when a lipid is solid at room temperature, it's called a fat. So coconut fat would be the correct definition of it. However, for advertising purposes, coconut oil is how it's sold. Coconut oil has a very high content of saturated fats. 65% of them are the three highest artery clogging fats. And so if you are trying to avoid animal fat, watch out for the trap of packaged products have coconut oil in them. Very common in ice cream, non-dairy cheeses, and many other products. Non-animal meats also frequently have high levels of coconut oil. I'd suggest checking the packages. And for me, if it's over 4 grams of saturated fat in a serving, I won't buy it. I'll choose another one. And there are choices that have lower amounts. Now, saturated fats have been found to increase memory decline. In this study, they killed off about half of the brain cells through oxidation, which is how brain cells are killed, and also through mitochondrial degeneration. Now, the mitochondria are energy factories in the brain, and their membranes are also damaged by oxidation. So this can be avoided simply by reducing the amount of animal fats and saturated fat in the diet. This is from a 2021 study in the journal Life Sciences. This was amazing. They fed 100 students, half of them, a 30% sat fat breakfast. Okay, high sat fat breakfast. The others had a 6% sat fat breakfast, which is nice, low, reasonable amount. You want to keep your sat fats at 6% or less of the calories in a day, so it's perfect. Now, the 30% sat fat breakfast, they reduced hippocampal memory 16%. How long did that take? Was it months, years, decades? No, 4 days. That's how long it took, just 4 days. Is that amazing? These high saturated fat breakfasts can do in 4 days. Now, another interesting part of this was that the sugar intake of these high fat breakfasts only went up 7%, just a little bit. But the blood sugar of the people to eating the high saturated fat breakfast jumped from 77, which is perfect, to 118 milligrams per deciliter, which is pre-diabetic in 4 days. So 2 effects of saturated fats, memory decline and insulin resistance, creating diabetes. Well, I just wanted to back this up with another study, another 2021 study. In this study, in 3 days, high saturated fat diets impaired. Now, the hippocampus is one of our main memory areas and thinking area too. It impaired learning and memory in the hippocampus in 3 days. Now, one way it did this is by the saturated fats reduced synaptic plasticity. That means, will basically make it hard to learn. They also damage the ability of our cells, our nerve cells in our brain, to use the common neurotransmitters, acetylcholine, dopamine, and serotonin. Now, acetylcholine is the one that donepezil is there to try and make more acetylcholine. And here we have saturated fats making less acetylcholine. Now, the final effect of these increased saturated fats in the diet was a decrease in brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is very, very important because this allows us to make new brain cells from neural stem cells so that we can continue to keep our brain alive. So we're losing connections between brain cells with reduced synaptic plasticity. We're reducing our ability to replace damaged brain cells, and we're reducing neurotransmitters, all with increased saturated fat in the diet. I hope I'm inspiring you to lower, because some of favorite foods have high saturated fats. I'll show you the foods, in fact, in a minute. In another study, this is a 2020 study, this was actually done in Australia. Higher intake of saturated fats in all stages of adulthood were associated with Alzheimer's disease and impaired cognitive performance. Reduced memory, memory speed, and overall cognitive function were noted. It was easy to find people with high saturated fats in Australia because the beef industry is very strong. So here's yet another study, and this is from Molecular Neurobiology in 2021. And this is actually a cell study instead of a people study. I usually just look at people studies, but in this case, I looked at a cell study. They used high saturated fats, and it killed off the brain cells. And they got about 50% of the brain cells killed off with a high saturated fat diet. Now, let's talk a little bit about brain inflammation. I recently, this year, published a paper called Reducing Neuroinflammation in Parkinson's Disease with Dietary Components. This neuroinflammation also happens with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And it is this neuroinflammation, inflammation of the nerves in the brain, that is creating more oxidation, more death of brain cells. So the brain is shrinking and connections are being damaged. What happens with the excess saturated fats in the brain is that we have a police force, an immune system in the brain called microglia. And normally they're not activated. They just patrol like a calm patrol police officer, and they don't create any trouble. In fact, they help brain cells. However, when they're activated by saturated fatty acids, the microglia have sensors, receptors called toll-like receptor 4. And this is a pattern recognition receptor that sees the excess saturated fatty acids, and it creates more nuclear factor kappa B, a transcription factor that causes the microglia to create many of these cytokines. These inflammatory cytokines include interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6, interferon gamma, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are part of the cytokine storm that we saw with COVID-19. And there's certainly a cytokine storm in the brain created by excess saturated fats. Now, we have seen that the saturated fats can cross the blood-brain barrier, and that they do activate microglia via the toll-like receptors. And this cascade of cytokines, principally through oxidation, kills off our brain cells. What can you do? Eat less saturated fats. They're not required, for humans. Looking at the supply of blood to the brain, this study looked at atherosclerosis. Those with atherosclerosis were more likely to have vascular dementia, more likely to have tiny strokes. This makes sense, doesn't it? And patients with clogged carotid neck arteries, the carotid arteries on the side of the neck, and you may have heard people say, my doctor checked and I have 70% blockage or 80% blockage, 90% blockage. This is not uncommon in Americans with a Western diet who eat. But we saw a man at the clinic the other day, and I calculated his saturated fats from his diet. It was 68 grams per day, and your maximum per day is 12. He was vastly over. Yes, he did have Alzheimer's disease, and this was a contributing cause. When they looked at people with clogged carotid arteries in the neck, they had poorer performance in language and navigation abilities and attention. One of the sad things for people who are progressing towards dementia is when they lose their driver's license, can no longer drive. So keeping those navigation abilities is really important, especially for us macho men who always want to be in the driver's seat. So again, try not to get your arteries blocked. And the principal way they're blocked is saturated fat. Those with clogging in the carotids had 2 to 5 times the risk of severe Alzheimer's disease, according to a Journal of Alzheimer's Disease study. And the insufficient blood to the brain declines learning and memory. And it increases amyloid plaque production by activating the beta and gamma secretase enzymes, which I will talk about a little further along in the study when I talk about the formation and how we can slow the formation of Alzheimer's plaque in our brain. When researchers looked at people with clogged arteries, they found that they were 4 to 15 times. Now, in the scientific literature, 15 times is really rare. I think I've rarely seen anything that says 15 times more likely to have cognitive degeneration. I remember one study looking at children who ate hot dogs had 9 times the chance of cancer. And I thought that was incredibly high. This, though, is very significant. Clogged arteries are a real problem because your brain just can't get the nutrients, the glucose, and the oxygen it needs. Clearing the arteries with a stent is only clearing a few inches of your carotid artery, and yet it improved memory 7%. Imagine what would happen if you reduced your saturated fat intake, reduced your blood cholesterol, reduced the clogging of your arteries, and that over a course of months or years, you were able to get some of your thinking back. We worked with one lady at Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience who had a pretty bad stroke, but she was okay. And she's 80 years old, and her blood cholesterol was 374. The average is 220, and 374 of total cholesterol is way over the top. No wonder she had a stroke. We worked with her, and after 6 months of reducing saturated fats, in her case, principally from heavy whipping cream, butter, and cheese, she was able to reduce her cholesterol down to 212. And then another 6 months later, her test came back with a 144 total cholesterol, which is fantastic. Other neurologists were coming in the office and saying, I want to see that. I can't believe without any drugs, no statins, she was able to reduce that. She was thin and athletic throughout the whole thing, but she was thin on the outside, but her arteries were clogged. So I just want to say that this, over the course of 1 year, she was able to clear her arteries out, and we had to reluctantly say goodbye, good luck, you don't need us anymore, your chances of getting a stroke are very slim. I did mention something about neuroinflammation and saturated fats, and I want to broaden that. Many of the sources of saturated fats, of course, are beef, pork, chicken, And even fish has some saturated fat and cholesterol too. Now, when these animals are killed, they have bacteria that can definitely damage us. We all know you have to cook these animal products or you could die of botulism or some other terrible disease. So the bacteria, these gram-negative bacteria, are killed during cooking, but the membranes remain in the food. They're called lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins. These lipopolysaccharides are drawn into the enterocytes, which are the cells lining our intestine. They're drawn in and packaged with saturated fats into the fat transporters for digestive fat, which are called chylomicrons. These chylomicrons are then transported through the lymphatic ducts and dumped into the superior vena cava into the bloodstream, where they circulate. When they're circulating, the lipopolysaccharides, along with the saturated fats, activate toll-like receptor 4, creating this cascade of inflammatory reactions in the brain and in the peripheral blood circulation system, creating neuroinflammation, which is very damaging to our brain. What can you do? Well, you can not eat animal products. That's certainly one thing you can do. Then you won't be getting any endotoxins. Now, it doesn't matter whether the beef is grass-fed or grass-finished or organic or non-organic. In any case, this type of food is going to create a lot of inflammation. Now, it's interesting because this inflammation revs up over a course of an hour after you eat the meal, continues very high inflammation for 2 or 3 hours, and then what happens? The next meal. So it might be a good idea for you to consider not eating foods that are going to create inflammation in your body and, of course, in your brain. Oh, I did find this study on the paleo diet. I mentioned brain-derived neurotropic factor, they abbreviated BDNF here in Brain Behavior Immunity Study. They put people on paleo diet for 2 months, and they checked their brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it reduced it 30% and reduced cognition too. This is because of the high saturated fatty acids. And even though the people were active, which increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, it was reduced in the paleo diet. Any diet high in saturated fat is going to reduce this brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So you have less synaptic plasticity, translate that as learning, and less neurogenesis, which means new nerves made in the hippocampus in this study and all throughout the thinking and memory areas of the brain. Okay, what has the most saturated fat? I've talked about them, avoid them. What's at the top of the list here? Anyone want to volunteer? Okay, it's coconut oil. 24 grams in 2 tablespoons and 12 Samax per day. Spam has a lot in a half can. I talked to, Spam is, we live in Hawaii, in Maui, Hawaii. I'm talking to you today, by the way, from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. But in Hawaii, I was at a store and a Hawaiian man who was morbidly obese was holding a can of Spam and asked me to see how much saturated fat it has. So I told him, okay, it's got 18 grams and half a can. And he says, okay, I eat 2 or 3 cans. How much is that? Well, too much would be the answer. Cheddar cheese. Cheese is one of the commonest contributors to saturated fat in the American diet. It's found in pizza and burritos and everywhere. Very, very common food, very high in saturated fat. So milk, yogurt, and ice cream have 5 grams each, not quite at the low end of the spectrum. So what can you eat? Next slide. Vegetable curry, 2 grams, perfectly safe. If you ate this 3 times a day, you'd wind up with 6 grams of saturated fat, only half the amount you need. But remember, any fatty food will have some saturated fatty acids. When I analyzed the Mediterranean diet, I was fascinated to see that the saturated fat mostly came from olive oil. It's not particularly high in saturated fat, but if you eat several tablespoons a day, it does start raising the amount of saturated fat in the diet. Tofu, very low. Soy milk, very, very low. Pinto beans or any beans, extremely low in saturated fat. Swiss chard and all vegetables, not a problem. We could summarize it using the diet doctor. I can check and see how much saturated fat a person has and where it came from. So people can identify. One man was amazed to see that his fast food milkshake was contributing highly to his saturated fat intake. And he said, well, I don't need to drink that. I can drink something else. This particular analysis is of the paleo diet. And if you look at the top left, you'll see that the calcium is extremely low, under 450 milligrams a day, whereas we need about 1,200 a day for elders anyway. And you'll also note that the paleo diet has a huge amount of protein in it, and protein tends to pull out calcium from the bones. The net result of this diet was a loss of bone mass, and studies have shown that in these high-fat diets, you're actually losing bone mass over time. The Diet Doctor, the current version of the Diet Doctor, I've been updating it quite frequently. This one has over 292,000 food choices. So you can find both healthy food and junk food in it. I was happy to see one man eat broccoli sprouts, and yes, it's in there. And another guy was eating ding dongs, and yes, they're in there too. So the way it works is either people send us their diet and we analyze it, or they buy the software and analyze their own diets and their friends. It can be found at drsteveblake.com. These are the foods with low saturated fats: fruits, root vegetables, all of the healthy things, beans. Nuts and seeds are generally quite low in saturated fats and have added vitamin E, which I'll tell you about. It's quite protective. This is a little brain break. This is a sunset in Mexico, in a little fishing village. So we can all relax our brains for just a moment before we get back to more ways to slow, stop, or even reverse dementia. Now, elevated blood cholesterol increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease. This study looked at people at midlife with high cholesterol and followed them along to see that they were 2 to 3 times as likely to get Alzheimer's disease. Cognitive impairment and amyloid plaque increased with higher cholesterol levels. Now, there's 2 ways that high cholesterol in the blood can create more amyloid plaque. One is by increasing the number of beta and gamma secretase enzymes that create the amyloid plaque. And 2 is by contributing to the lipid rafts on the cell membranes in the brain where the amyloid precursor is, to allow more of it to become amyloid plaque. So it's a good idea. What we did in our trial was we asked people to reduce their dietary saturated fat to 6% of calories, or 12 grams for about 2,000 calorie diet, to lower blood cholesterol. This study was reported in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in 2017, one of the better studies. A high saturated fat and cholesterol diet increased cholesterol and neuronal lipid rafts. And as I mentioned, it activated both gamma and beta secretase, increasing amyloid beta release from amyloid precursor proteins. This results in learning and memory impairment. The way it works is the amyloid precursor protein is snipped off by these 2 secretase enzymes into 42-length amyloid plaque. This amyloid beta, it's not plaque yet. Now it's amyloid beta peptides. That goes on to be aggregated. The aggregates of this are the most toxic to the brain and kill off brain cells and damage neuronal connections. Then it becomes aggregated into the plaque in the brain, which can house advanced glycation end products, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But I think the key here is that you want to keep your saturated fat and cholesterol reduced. High cholesterol is one of the factors that increases neuroinflammation. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more today about oxysterols, oxidized cholesterol, that increase brain inflammation. They impair cognition, and they're increasing the production of this toxic amyloid beta peptides. Oxysterols. The foods that have a high amount of cholesterol will be eggs, very high, meat, fish, poultry, ghee, and dairy products. Not listed here are shrimp and some others that are very high. Oxysterols are oxidized cholesterol. They're neurotoxins. They increase brain inflammation and amyloid beta in Alzheimer's disease, also increase Lewy bodies in Parkinson's disease. There are three sources. From cooked animal foods, solution, don't eat them. From the breakdown of excess cholesterol, solution, don't eat excess saturated fat, you won't have excess cholesterol. And three, from oxidation of cholesterol in the body. Now, sometimes the body needs to oxidize cholesterol. For example, in the brain, if there's too much cholesterol, cholesterol cannot be removed from the brain intact. So the brain can change it to become an oxysterol so it can be moved through the blood-brain barrier and get out of the brain. And this is a beneficial aspect. However, if your body is loaded with cholesterol and low in antioxidant, then you're going to be creating a lot of oxysterols, which then travel to the brain and damage it. When your blood levels of cholesterol are too high, it's converted into 27-hydroxycholesterol. This is an oxysterol. And then that can be transported from the liver into the brain very easily. And it contributes to oxidative stress in the brain, which means killing off brain cells. During the course of Alzheimer's disease, the brain loses about half of its brain cells. We don't want this to happen to younger folks who want to keep their brain sharp, or to older folks who don't want to progress to Alzheimer's disease. When you look at the atherosclerotic plaque on the inside of arteries, what you see is 20 times more cholesterol than in healthy inside of arteries, and 45 times more oxysterols. The oxysterols increase the arterial plaque, and they can make it more prone to rupture. If you eat a meal high in cholesterol, such as, let's say, a shrimp omelet would be about the highest thing I've measured in cholesterol. This is going to create a huge amount of cholesterol in your arteries, which can lead to cholesterol crystals shown on the top right of the slide. They're very sharp, and they can slice that plaque in your arteries so that it breaks off, can create a heart attack, a stroke, or vascular dementia. Be better not to eat cholesterol from any external sources at all. We certainly have no need for cholesterol. And you know, the amount of cholesterol we make every second is 70 quadrillion molecules. Is that amazing or what? So this oxysterol, it creates vascular dementia. And two ways that we can help with this is vitamin E and carotenoids to slow cholesterol oxidation, and of course, no dietary cholesterol at all. This is from a 2021 study, Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience, that's right. Okay, I talked about the brain shrinking, and here we have pictures of it. It's kind of sad. On the top, we have a brain, and then to the right, we have a shrunken brain. We have a normal brain on the bottom left. This is a PET scan showing glucose activity. Glucose is the preferred nutrient for the brain. It's the energy source for the brain. The brain craves it. And we all know this because when we have low blood sugar in the brain, of course, we don't think very clearly. When blood sugar is good, it's better. We know in the clinic when neuropsychological testing is going on, we encourage people very strongly to have a good meal before they come in. Because if they come in without eating breakfast in the morning, their test scores are lower than if they come in after eating something, and that can be a false indication of progression. So basically what we want is our brains to look like the ones on the left and not move to the ones on the right. What is it that kills off these millions of brain cells? It's oxidation. And there's two ways to deal with this. One, keep away from things that oxidize the brain, such as oxysterols from cholesterol, saturated fats, and other inflammatory substances. And two, take in as much antioxidants as you can to protect your brain and, of course, all your other parts of your body. This was a very nice study that just came out. It's 2021. It's from the Singapore Chinese study. And it was really nicely done. They followed people for 20 years. And they looked at the people who had better vitamin C. And they had 14% better memory and cognition. Isn't that amazing? Just having more vitamin C. And they looked at people with vitamin E, 17% better cognition. They checked each carotenoid separately, but in summary, 12% better cognition. And then the flavonoids, which are one of the polyphenols that are very anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, they found that 23% better. So if you add all these things up, you're going to see that you can protect your brain and protect your memory and your thinking abilities quite powerfully. This is a 2021 study in the Journal of Gerontology, very well done study, and I'm glad that I have this information. What are the antioxidants? Carotenoids are the colorful pigments in fruits and vegetables, or if they're green, they also have carotenoids, which is hidden by the chlorophyll. Vitamin C, of course, is found in fruits and vegetables. Vitamin E in the natural forms, and polyphenols. Now, what's similar about these four sources? They're from plants. Whole plant foods have the most antioxidants, and animal foods have the least antioxidants, and of course, create oxidation as well. We also have our own internal antioxidants. These internal antioxidants are able to protect us very powerfully, but only if they have the minerals that activate the enzymes. So one of the enzymes that we need is superoxide dismutase, and that needs zinc, copper, and manganese. Another is glutathione peroxidase, and that needs selenium. If we are low in these minerals, they don't work. We also depend on coenzyme Q10, which is made in our body, and catalase, also made in our body as antioxidants. And that's the difference between the big brain and the little brain. Now, I like to analyze diets, and here are a series of diets that you can look at. If the number is in red, it means it's inadequate. You notice in the right column, the vitamin E column, well, all but 2 are inadequate in vitamin E, which is not surprising. Consider that vitamin E is deficient in 93% of American diets. This is also true in Europe and other places. Americans just don't get enough. Look at all those red numbers. And what was the worst was, well, the McDougall diet, because it's a very low-fat diet and vitamin E occurs in fatty foods. Although the Atkins diet, the standard American diet, were very low in vitamin E. Vitamin C, the worst diet was the Atkins diet, and the best diet was the raw vegan diet, also the winner for vitamin E because of the nuts and seeds that were eaten on this diet. Some of the diets, like the paleo diet, includes vegetables and fruits, which is a good thing. But as we saw, you don't really want your brain degenerating or your bones degenerating. And so that's not so good. Also, you may notice that the transition vegetarian diet, now this diet is where people are eating eggs and cheese and white noodles, and the diet actually is not much better from a saturated fat standpoint than an American diet, nor is it better from a vitamin C and vitamin E standpoint. I think that analyzing diets is a very good thing to do. I'm disappointed by how few doctors who will speak even at this wonderful convention are actually analyzing diets and seeing which ones are the best, which ones have the things we need and which ones don't, and which ones have too much, the things we don't want too much. So we want to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. This study was in the Annals of Pharmacotherapy, and they reduced the risk of Alzheimer's disease 40%. 5,000 older people were followed for 11 years. Those who took vitamin C and vitamin E supplements reduced their risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia by 40%. This includes the use of multivitamins. The vitamins reduce neuronal damage and brain cell death caused by oxidative stress. This picture of brain and body food you see on the bottom right is what I made so that people could get most of the nutrients that we used in the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial. And you can easily see which ones we couldn't stuff in there, but it really seems to help a lot. I certainly take it to keep my brain sharp. Reading all these studies, I need a sharp brain. Now, in this is called a meta-analysis, and it's called a forest graph. As you can see that just about all of the studies showed that less vitamin C impaired the memory and increased Alzheimer's disease. So you definitely need vitamin C. How to do it? Eat fruits and vegetables. That's the best way. However, when I analyze diets, which I love to do, even on the best diet, I rarely see over 300 or 400 milligrams of vitamin C, whereas the optimal amount of vitamin C is more like 1,200 milligrams. This is why I supplement with the brain and body food to bring my diet up to the 1,200 milligrams so that I have the amount that is needed. You see, humans are one of the very few animals, 3 animals, that don't make their own vitamin C. So we need to take it in our diet. But if you look at those animals that do make vitamin C and calculate up how much they make, adjust for human body weight, you get about, well, 1,200 to 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day would be the required amount for optimal health for humans. By the way, vitamin C is also very helpful for age-related loss of immune function, which is crucial in the COVID pandemic. Vitamin C supplements in this study improve thinking and memory. And what was interesting is that this study looked at plasma. They didn't depend on people's memory of when they took vitamin C or how much they took. They looked in the blood and found out how much they had. The dementia group was 3 times more likely to have low plasma vitamin C levels. So in the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial, we supplied 800 milligrams of vitamin C daily. And that's the amount also in the brain and body food that I take daily. Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience 2019 study backs up this 3 times more likely to have low plasma vitamin C in a dementia group. I want to talk about coenzyme Q10. It's known as ubiquinone or ubiquinol because it's ubiquitous. All of our cells make it. They may make less with time and age. And if you're taking statin drugs, the coenzyme Q10 reduces our ability to make coenzyme Q10 by about 40%. If you do need to take statin drugs for a period of time until you can adjust your diet to lower your blood cholesterol, it would probably be a good idea, and please ask your doctor if you should take coenzyme Q10 along with it. But it's very difficult for dietary, supplementary coenzyme Q10 to get all the way into the insides of the mitochondria where it's needed. So it's really best if you can make it yourself and not interfere with that making by taking statins, more technically known as hydroxymethylglutarate coenzyme A reductase inhibitors. Coenzyme Q10 has a potential to improve brain function in healthy elderly populations. That's good. I'm a healthy elderly population. Coenzyme Q10 improves energy production. It's required for aerobic energy production in the cells. That's from another 2019 study. Now, supplementary coenzyme Q10 reduce amyloid beta in brain blood vessels and reduce oxidation of death of brain neurons. It can reduce vascular dementia that is triggered by amyloid beta. So in our trial, we did supply coenzyme Q10 daily. In my book shown here, Nutrients for Memory, I outline how much we used and what form we used. With coenzyme Q10, it's important to use the ubiquinol form, not the ubiquinone form. Excuse me, it's called ubiquinone, but I say ubiquinone because I try to take none of it. It's just a memory tool. Okay, let's look at our built-in antioxidants. We have superoxide dismutase. I mentioned that we need copper, zinc, and manganese. Well, zinc was found to be low in Alzheimer's disease. Why? Because it's all used up, and there's not enough in the diet. Also, selenium was found to be low, and that's needed for glutathione peroxidase. We supplied manganese, zinc, copper, and selenium in the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial. Of course, I put it in the brain and body food, and I want my and your protective antioxidant enzymes to protect our brains, and they can't do it without these minerals. So it's something that seems to be missed somehow by many researchers in the field, although it's backed up by this study in the European Biochemical Society 2018 and hundreds of others. There's no doubt at all that these minerals are needed, and there's no doubt that they're low in Alzheimer's disease. Now, plant foods are really wonderful for helping with Alzheimer's disease. The plant foods you see on the right are in a fruit net on our boat. And all of that's about worth $5 in Mexico, and really delicious food that it is. and so good for you. Why are plant foods so good for you? They have polyphenols, vitamin C. Polyphenols are antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, protect our brain cells. Some of them, like the anthocyanins, go right up to our brain and protect them. Vitamin C, vitamin E are found in plant foods principally. Carotenoids are found only in plant foods, and these all protect brain cells from death. They reduce inflammation and improve cognition and memory. When they looked at post-mortem Alzheimer's brains, they found that these carotenoids, like beta-carotene and lutein, all of the carotenoids were lower. And they weren't getting enough. But we can get enough. Eat those colorful fruits and vegetables. Here's a study on blueberries, and it's the 2018 study in the European Journal of Nutrition, one of my favorite journals. Anthocyanins in berries can cross the blood-brain barrier. They found inside the hippocampus, a thinking area of the brain. And they protect the brain both with antioxidant and anti-inflammatory actions. They improve memory, and were found also in the cerebellum, cortex, and the striatum. And the striatum is part of our movement area. And for people with Parkinson's disease, it's even more important to get those anthocyanins in there to help with movement disorders. It may help with other movement disorders too. Here's a graph of anthocyanins. The risk over 26 years of dementia was cut in half by flavonols and cut into a quarter by anthocyanins. And you can see here that the 100% risk, and then with more quercetin. Quercetin is the most abundant polyphenol in our diets, most diets. And it's very protective, found in green beans and onions and grapes and many other healthy whole plant foods. So quercetin knocked the risk of dementia over 26 years by half. Anthocyanins knocked it down even further, down to much, much less. Those who ate more berries delayed dementia by up to 2.5 years. This is from the Nurses' Health Study, reported in the Annals of Neurology. We use 1 cup of berries daily, as I mentioned, either blueberries, strawberries, or red grapes in the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial. And this also helped people to recover. Now, carotenoids are another plant food substance that's really, really helpful. This 2020 study in the Journal of Nutrition shows that without carotenoids, you have this risk of Alzheimer's disease. But on a dose-dependent manner, if you ate 9 milligrams, you had less, 12 less, 14 less, 17 less. At 22 milligrams, you had 51% less chance of having problems with your memory and dementia. However, 22 milligrams was the highest they found in that population. I checked my diet, I eat 43 milligrams a day. So maybe my risk is even lower. I'd like to think so. And I'd like your risk to be lower too. So eat plenty of these colorful carotenoids. And they're found not only in fruits and vegetables, but purple sweet potatoes or red sweet potatoes and carrots and many other foods, both roots and fruits and vegetables, easy to find. Here we get another little brain break. This is the West Maui Mountains, and I look forward to returning there, although Mexico is very beautiful. The risk of Alzheimer's disease was 4 times with those deficient in vitamin E. Did you know 93% of Americans are deficient in vitamin E? I know I mentioned that once, but it is a stunning statistic. Don't be one of them. The recent meta-analysis of 116 publications, that's a big meta-analysis, confirmed that Alzheimer's patients had significantly lower vitamin E levels in both cerebrospinal fluid and in the brain. How does vitamin E work? Vitamin E can regenerate superoxide dismutase. I mentioned, do you remember the 3 minerals necessary for it? That zinc, copper, and manganese? Okay, just testing your memory. It also reduces brain inflammation. When you have enough vitamin E, less of the cyclooxygenase enzymes are made. And this is very important because cyclooxygenase enzymes are precisely the ones that convert arachidonic acid into hydroperoxy icosahexatetraenoic acid, convert that into leukotrienes that are highly inflammatory in the brain and the body. everywhere. So it's really great that vitamin E can create less of these COX enzymes so you don't overproduce these highly inflammatory molecules, also reducing blood clotting, thinning the blood, and reducing pain and fever. Vitamin E is more powerful than even vitamin A or C and provided a substantial degree of protection against Alzheimer's disease and dementia, according to this 2018 study in the Journal of Medical Research and Innovation. And I show you the sunflower seeds up there. In this study, it was a prospective study in China, and they looked at people who ate nuts, and it lowered their odds of memory loss 40% over 2 years. Again, a stunning lowering of loss. Now, in China, the most eaten nut is peanuts, which are fairly rich in vitamin E. They concluded nut consumption was associated with sustained memory. An ounce of nuts daily in this study, we use 2 ounces, 1 ounce of sunflower seeds and 1 ounce of walnuts. In this study, reduced neurodegenerative disease 35% across 29 studies. That's actually the second study down there in BMC NIST. They followed 800 elders for 4 years. Vitamin E in food lowered the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by 67%. Because of this study and hundreds of others, I included in our Hawaii dementia prevention trial 1 ounce of walnuts and 1 ounce of sunflower seeds. You can do this yourself. It's not hard at all. Because many elders have bowel pockets called diverticuli and are advised not to eat nuts, intact nuts, we had the people grind their nuts up in either a coffee grinder or a blender so that when they ate the nuts, they would both get more vitamin E and not get problems with bowel pockets. What about supplementary vitamin E? When you take supplementary vitamin E, you're going to very, very likely get fake vitamin E. What it is the synthetic vitamin E is called all-racemic alpha tocopherol. The real stuff is called RRR alpha tocopherol. And RRR alpha tocopherol is shown in the top left of my little drawing here. I should give credit to McGraw-Hill Vitamins and Minerals Demystified for this graph that I made for them and included in my book. If you look at the graph, fake, 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 fake. 4 of them, the ones on the right that start with S, are completely inactive vitamin E. And now this is like having vitamin E that looks like vitamin E go up to protect a brain cell, but it's like a rent-a-cop with a plastic gun and no bullets. It doesn't work. It doesn't protect the brain cell from death. Your body says, oh, look, we have vitamin E, let's send it up there. But it's not, it's fake. And the other 3 fake ones are much less effective than real vitamin E. It's extremely hard to find real vitamin E in a supplement. I know that when I went to my manufacturer of brain and body food and said, I want the real vitamin E, they said, do you realize this is going to double the cost of the entire supplement? And I said, okay. Vitamin E is effective in improving cognitive performance in Alzheimer's disease patients. The form of vitamin E is critically important, not only that it is real, not fake alpha tocopherol, but that the gamma tocopherol and others are included in it. We supplied 500 milligrams of non-synthetic vitamin E, and I put between 400 and 500 in the brain and body food. And I feel that this is necessary to protect my brain, and it's very difficult to find a good source of it, though. This study in 2019 confirmed that vitamin E is effective in improving cognitive performance in Alzheimer's disease. This is a pool in our stream where we sometimes go to refresh ourselves, and I hope it refreshes your brain, because now we're going to look at how Alzheimer's plaque is formed. Did you notice that modern medicine ignores clinically proven medical plants? It's really unusual for an American doctor to prescribe clinical plants. However, it's very common in Europe where medical doctors prescribe clinical plants, or in India or Africa or China or anywhere else. They do use these plants. In this 2019 study, which is an expert consensus study from all over the world, They demonstrated that standardized ginkgo extract, not to be confused with plain ginkgo, but the standardized extract of ginkgo, improved cognition, behavior, and activities of daily living in Alzheimer's and vascular dementia in all patients, and they were without risks. Now, it is a caveat not to take ginkgo with any blood thinning drugs. So if you're taking warfarin, Pradaxa, Xarelto, Eliquis, or any other anticoagulant or blood thinning drug, I would recommend, from an abundance of caution, that you not also take ginkgo biloba or get your doctor's clearance to take it if you want to take it and you're taking these drugs. Other than that, there are no downsides to ginkgo biloba. One of the ways it works is by thinning the blood a bit so that it can get into the individual brain cells. So it is really helpful. Now, they did a meta-analysis looking at 9 double-blind randomized trials. These are all placebo-controlled, a gold-plated science. And they showed that ginkgo biloba helped both in delaying the onset of Alzheimer's disease and in treating it. Substantial evidence shows that ginkgo, unlike the drugs, donepezil and memantine, protect memory neurons against cell death induced by beta amyloid. This is fantastic. They're neuroprotective. And another study looked at ginkgo along with donepezil. They had a group taking one or the other or both. And they found that it improved memory as well as donepezil, but without the side effects, which I mentioned, can be very commonly nausea and vomiting. It reduces blood viscosity and dilates blood vessels. So it also reduces density of free radicals. It's antioxidant. This half-year randomized placebo-controlled study with 60 elder patients with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease showed that it was helpful. So I included in the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial, if you do want to include ginkgo biloba, make sure it is the standardized extract of ginkgo biloba and not something else. Because, doctors criticize herbs, and in a way, they have a good point. You don't know how the herb was grown, if it had enough water or nutrients or sun, if the soil was any good. So the different bottles of ginkgo may have different amounts of the different parts, the ginkolicides or the various active ingredients. However, with the standardized extract, it's standardized on 3 of the most important ones. And so you know that it's going to be the same every single capsule and that it's going to help. Now, gotukola is the other plant that we used in Alzheimer's disease, and it reduced the amyloid plaque in the brain. I think it's interesting that it's an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor because so is donepezil. If I had more time, I'd tell you all about donepezil and how it was derived from Nazi nerve gas into organophosphate pesticides and then into a very commonly used drug for dementia. Gotukola has many nice side effects. It inhibits inflammation and oxidation, and it protects against DNA damage. A 2-month study in healthy adults found that it improved memory score from 25 to 28, improving memory and cognition 10% in middle age. So we did include gotukola standardized extract 300 milligrams in our study. Okay, another brain break, a couple of peaceful sailboats. Oh, I want to talk about advanced glycation end products. I have so much information for you. When you fry, broil, or barbecue meat, even if it's just slightly browned, there is a Maillard reaction, that can result in damaging advanced glycation end products. So this can happen with beef, pork, chicken, or fish. And in cheese, these are formed when it's aged. So there's not much in milk, but in hard cheese, yes, there's quite a bit of these advanced glycation end products. They increase brain inflammation. They attach to the RAGE receptor for advanced glycation end products is very aptly named the RAGE receptor, generate an estimated 50 times as many free radicals damaging and killing off brain cells compared to normal proteins. These AGEs can lodge in the amyloid plaque and stay there forever, showering your brain with radiation like free radical damage. Let's avoid them. Where are they found? Let's see. Chicken, bacon, beef, chicken, chicken, beef, chicken, chicken, beef, chicken, turkey, chicken. Okay, you get the idea. Now, these foods are not only sources of advanced glycation end products, and studies showing that these dietary advanced glycation end products, when eaten, about half are absorbed into the bloodstream, where they're transported to the brain and damage it. It's also true that these same foods have organochlorine pesticides bioaccumulated, whether or not they're organic, whether or not they're grass-fed. They have rancid oils from cooking, harmine, which increases tremors, arachidonic acid, which increases inflammation and clogging of arteries and pain. Endotoxins, which I mentioned, heterocyclic amines, which are highly carcinogenic. Oxysterols, which I mentioned, that's oxidized cholesterol, excess saturated fat, of course, and lack of anti-inflammatory activity that you'll find in all of the healthy plant foods. Advanced glycation end products were 2 to 3 times higher in Alzheimer's brains and found to be probable causes of tau tangles. Now, tau tangles are more tightly correlated with these symptoms of Alzheimer's disease than are amyloid plaques. ADEPT reduced in our trial the dietary advanced glycation end products by limiting cooking methods, no barbecuing, broiling, or deep frying of meat, chicken, or fish, and no hard cheeses were allowed on our diet in there. This was difficult for people to do. We have a Neuroscience Nutrition Foundation. All of us worked for free during the years of doing this trial and for many years afterwards. And if you would like to go to neurosciencenutrition.org and give us a donation, we'd be duly grateful and continue our work. Thank you. Now, I want to tell you more about how these amyloid plaques are formed. They're involved in about 80% of dementia cases. The clumps of protein occur between nerve cells and look like these fuzzballs in the picture. Also, there are tau tangles not shown that are phosphorylated tau, and they also contribute to it. Now, you see a cell membrane here, and beta and gamma secretase snip off the amyloid precursor protein labeled APP here to form the beta amyloid peptide. This peptide goes on to form oligomers, which are highly toxic and kill off brain cells. Then they become fibrils, also highly toxic. Then they lodge in amyloid plaque, which continue to be quietly toxic and house advanced glycation end products forever. Very difficult to get rid of these things. So let's see about how we can not form them. SAMe, S-adenosine methionine, quenches the genes that make these gamma and beta secretase enzymes. So when we quench the genes, it results in lower amyloid beta production. And in this study in molecular neurobiology in 2018, they said, thus preventing Alzheimer's disease. What they really meant was thus preventing the formation of amyloid beta and more amyloid plaques. Hard to get rid of the ones that are already there. They looked at people with Alzheimer's disease. They found severely low levels of SAMe in the cerebrospinal fluid and all brain regions in Alzheimer's patients. How do you make it in the body? Vitamin B12 and folate create SAMe to slow amyloid plaque creation. And so SAMe is actually made from homocysteine, an undesirable blood chemical, if folate and vitamin B12 are available. In Alzheimer's disease, of homocysteine and 4 times the risk of dementia and AD. Patients with low levels of folate tripled the risk of vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Conclusion is that folate deficiency may precede Alzheimer's disease. Then they looked at people with Alzheimer's disease and saw they were 4 times more likely to have elevated homocysteine, low vitamin B12, and 3 times as likely to have low folate levels. So we did supply in our study vitamin B12 as methylcobalamin and real folate, that's the methyl tetrahydrofolate. In this study, they looked over a course of years, 2 years, and they gave some people vitamin B12 and folate supplements, and the ones in red didn't. Brain degeneration was increased in the case where they didn't give them the supplements, but they didn't find brain degeneration in the case where they did give them the supplements. Where is it found? Folate's found in greens and beans and other healthy whole plant foods. The small graph on the right shows that Americans often get less than half the folate that they need from their diet. So this helps explain the epidemic of Alzheimer's disease. Now, vitamin B12 often found deficient in people who are eating plenty. It's very hard to absorb, or in vegans who don't eat any. So it's very important for all of us to supplement. I put 200 milligrams of the methylcobalamin in the brain and body food, and somewhere between 100 and 1,000 micrograms daily is a good dose, not toxic at all. SAMe reduces oxidation and inflammation by increasing glutathione. I think this is fantastic. So it actually helps as a neuroprotectant. And SAMe also reduces Alzheimer's disease. So in our trial, we not only help people to make their own SAMe out of homocysteine with folate and B12, actually supply 200 milligrams of SAMe as well, so that no one was going to create more amyloid plaque if we can help it. Caution, don't mix SAMe with psychoactive drugs. Either SSRI drugs like Prozac or MAOA inhibitors. Any psychoactive drug should not be taken with SAMe, because one of the side effects of SAMe is it makes you happy. So we had people take it in the mornings, they'd be happy all day. Another side effect is that it seems in another study not shown to be as helpful with knee osteoarthritis pain as is Celebrex, an extremely powerful painkiller. Those are nice side effects. So from these studies, we can see that you can cut your risk of Alzheimer's 4 times just by getting enough folate and B12. I want to mention 2 more things before I close. One is exercise. In this 2019 study in Alzheimer's and Dementia Journal, we see that the normal risk of Alzheimer's is 40% less if you increase exercise, 72% less if you can get that up to moderate exercise. And if you have normal risk of Alzheimer's disease, but get low exercise, then you have an even higher risk of Alzheimer's disease. So I would encourage everyone in our study, we could not include exercise. We were maxed out with all the nutrients. After all, 16 different modalities in one study. It was really pushing the limit. But I encourage you to include more exercise. Of course, please increase your exercise slowly. If you have any circulatory or cardiac problems, talk to your doctor about how high you can get your pulse and how long you can get it there. Get an active range for aerobic workouts. Don't just go ahead and exercise without advice from a qualified expert, please. Another thing that increases cognitive decline in Alzheimer's by 6-fold is obesity. And I know that obesity is epidemic all around the world, and definitely including America. And obese individuals have higher inflammation in the brain, greater destruction of brain cells, decreased performance on memory tasks, and deficits in executive functioning. So this is shown by a 2021 study in Aging Research Reviews. I would encourage you to please keep yourself as slim as possible, both with exercise and good dietary choices. So what have we learned today? We've learned that we need to eat lots of antioxidant foods to protect brain cells. Berries, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, and seeds. These are the top foods to eat, as whole and as raw as possible. Supplement with vitamin C, only real vitamin E, folate, vitamin B12, selenium, copper, zinc, and manganese. Avoid animal fats to improve brain blood flow, many other reasons, and avoid broiled or fried animal products as well. CoQ10 and SAMe can be helpful. Ginkgo biloba improves memory and blood flow. Don't take with blood thinners. And gotu kola and SAMe don't take with psychoactive drugs. And gotu kola keeps memory strong. Remember to take only the standardized extract forms of these 2 herbs. I want to thank you very much for being here today. And this is my book, Nutrients from Memory. My wife wrote a book called Dementia Prevention Cookbook. Excellent. She actually gave this to participants in the study, wrote it and gave it to them for the study. And you can also benefit from this cookbook, because it's not enough just to know what to do. You need to know how to do it and how to make delicious recipes too. So I would like to close my talk now, and thank you very much for listening.